if you're feeling stuck with your photography and thinking that you're not quite getting the results you want, then you probably just need to apply one or more of these tips. So in this video, I'm going to share exactly what you can do to start improving your photography today, from shooting tips to composition and also editing. And thank you to Lumina Neo for sponsoring this video. You can get a 10% discount on their editing software by using the link in my description. Starting off with something super simple you can do, which is add some lens filters to your kit. And one that I have been really loving lately is a circular polarizer. You can use any brand you like, but what it does is reduce the glare and reflections on surfaces by filtering out specific light waves. And you can control this by rotating the filter to achieve the look that you're after. Instead of having a photo that looks like this, where the water is all overexposed and there's no detail, you can get photos like this with fairly minimal effort. This is one of my favorite photos I took while I was in Oregon, where I used my CPL. While the original photo looks quite good, I think there is still more we can do to step it up a notch. In Lumina Neo, I'm going to crop and straighten my photo and make sure the waterfall is in the middle. Next, I'm doing a very minimal tone edit, mostly using the tonal curve to add depth to the shadows. And what is really going to bring this photo together is using the atmosphere tool here and adding fog, because the overcast sky we have here looks really boring. So the fog just helps the photo look moodier. Last but not least, let's just get rid of these people in the distance here with the erase tool, because their colorful jackets are pretty distracting. In terms of the composition for this photo, I'm using natural framing. So I'm using the leaves and branches to frame the waterfall, which helps pull your eye to the subject. My second tip is that color theory is everything, and you should always be thinking about colors when you're doing photography, because that is what is really going to help tie your photos together. I love looking for pops of color when I'm traveling, so I waited for a while for this tram in Portugal to line up with the road here. We have woken up super early on our very last day. We are flying out in just a few hours, but we have just enough time to come back and redeem ourselves for the yellow tram shot. So we're waiting. There's, I think, 3 minutes to go until it hopefully starts. But I've got my 70-200 because this is a shot that I wanted to get that I missed last time because it was a public holiday.
So how many tram shots have you gotten?
We waited a whole hour. The train went once. The yellow against the plain buildings makes the image really visually appealing. I'm using the natural framing technique here again, by the way. I also like to keep an eye out for monochromatic color schemes. So this is when you're using variations of a single color hue. This image here works so well because there are so many shades of blue, and any other colors that appear are neutral, so they don't take attention away from the image. As a portrait photographer, I also take lots of portraits with my landscape photography, so outfits are another way you can tie in color schemes to your photos. And you can either get your subjects to wear something specific, or when you're doing street photography, you can just keep an eye out for people wearing certain colors that are going to match the location you're shooting in. So while we're in Banff, Dan took this photo of me that reminds me so much of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think it's the frozen river. So I'm going to use the color transfer tool and upload this screen grab from the movie to get Lumina to match the colors for me. You can adjust the sliders if you like, but I really like what it looks like already. Next, I'm going to use curves to adjust the tone a little, and I also want to add a few creative effects. So first I'm going to use glow and add a soft autumn effect and also film grain so we can match the movie look. I'm also noticing the dead grass down here is a bit distracting, so I'm going to use the burn tool to darken it and also erase the little pier out there in the distance. I want to compare compositions for you here because we did take a few photos in this spot, so let's copy the edits and paste it onto this photo. The one on the left was shot at 95mm and the other was shot at 35mm. While I really like the 35mm shot, we have that symmetry happening, a little bit of minimalism too. I definitely prefer the look of the telephoto image in this case. Since we are using a long lens, we're able to include more elements in the frame as we have to be further back physically to get a similar shot to the 35 image. So here we have natural framing with the branches and layers from the compression of the lens, which makes it more visually interesting as there's more things for you to look at in the frame. And this brings me to tip number 3, which is, while it's great to photograph all the main landscapes and sites on a photo excursion or a photo trip, you shouldn't forget to photograph the smaller things too. The main reason to do this is it's going to break your habit of only shooting obvious subjects. This way, you will be able to start creating images that are more unique and interesting for your portfolio, rather than taking a photo that hundreds of people have already taken. It'll also keep you practicing, even when the scenery isn't super amazing, but it's always good to be shooting and learning. Speaking of scenery, we were at this really ugly waterfall in Iceland. I'm joking. This was a bucket list location for me to visit, and it was more incredible in real life than I could have ever imagined. But one of the ways that I like making scenery my own if I'm photographing at a really popular spot, which I briefly mentioned in the last tip, is to incorporate people into the frame. So rather than Skogafoss being the main subject of my landscape image, adding a person in the frame can help add a sense of scale, which we did when we got up nice and close to the waterfall. A person is also a really good anchor for your frames too. So an anchor in composition is something in the foreground that gives your photo a starting point and helps lead the viewer's eye through the image. Looking at the original image, I think it needs some help. So I'm going to start with a preset for this one. And I really like the look of softbox, so I'll make a few small adjustments to help it suit my picture. The most important thing you should be doing in any edit is cropping. I'm going to make sure I am perfectly centered in the frame. I'm using the curves tool next to add more blues to the image. Since the entire image is quite dark, I really only need to focus on the shadows points down here on the tone curve for each of the color channels. I know we have quite a lot of mist already, but it never hurt anyone to add some more, so let's use atmosphere to just exaggerate the mist that's already there. Lastly, we have a lot of people in the frame, so let's use gen arrays to get rid of them. I'll just head to our clone tool and fix up this little mark here just to make it look more natural. This last tip is a little bit more of a challenge of sorts that I want you to think about doing one day, and that is removing the distraction of gear by only choosing one focal length to shoot with for a certain period of time. I like to do this a lot while I'm traveling, so while I was in Japan, there were quite a few days where in the morning, I would wake up and I would choose a focal length that I wanted to shoot with that day, and that would be the only lens that I brought with me while we were out exploring. So this can be really good for you to improve, as it forces you to be more intentional with your photography. You can't rely on zooming to frame your shot, so you have to physically move around and think more about your compositions. It also trains your eye and your creative muscles. One of the ways this works is it can challenge you to make an interesting photo even if the lens isn't particularly ideal for the situation. You'll also get to know that focal length really well if you use it for long enough. Then you'll be able to see compositions for that lens with your eyes without even having to use your camera, which is pretty neat. On one of the days in Tokyo, I was using my 35mm to capture photos all day, and we ended up at this overpass taking photos of a restaurant during blue hour. I shot it quite underexposed to make sure I have enough detail in the sky to work with. So let's start off by balancing the light by using the enhance accent and sky sliders. I'm also going to tweak the exposure, highlights, and curves. Something I like to do with editing is go back and forth with my tools, especially the tones. So once I edit the colors next, I'll go back to my raw develop tools to keep adjusting in between a lot of these steps. Next, I need to make the colors look cohesive, so let's head to Twilight Enhancement, and I'm going to use the Mauve preset and turn it down a bit to add more color to the sky. The yellows aren't looking quite right yet either, so let's go to Hue in HSL to adjust them to be warmer. And let's increase the saturation of blue to help the sky and those neon signs to really stand out. Finally, I want to add a few more effects, so let's go to Magic Light, and I'm going to add a soft beam of light to the lamppost, and I'm going to use the brush to add an extra one on this back lamppost that it missed. And then let's go to Glow, which I love using, and I'm going to add a very subtle glow effect. So if you enjoyed the editing that I've done, don't forget you can get 10% off Luminar Neo by using the link in my description. They're also launching an exciting update in November called Luminar Ecosystem. So this is going to let you start editing on mobile and then seamlessly continue editing on desktop with all your edits synced across devices. But let me know which one was your favorite tip in the comments that you're going to use in your photography. But otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.